Hello, 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 hello. This is Deaf to False Music, bringing you honest music reviews from the hills of eastern Kentucky. And right now, we're going to go back a little bit and talk about an album that was kind of looked over in 2010. Talking about Shooter Jennings and Hierophant's Black Ribbons. Now, sit down, get yourself a sandwich, and get yourself a glass of water, because this is going to be a long one, I guarantee you. Alright, first of all, let's do a little backstory about Shooter Jennings, shall we? Shooter Jennings is, of course, the child of Waylon Jennings, the outlaw country singer, the late great Waylon Jennings. And since 2005, Shooter has been kind of blazing a trail in the outlaw country rock world. And in kind of the no depression alternative country vibe as well, with 2005's Let's Put the O Back in Country, 2006's Electric Rodeo, and 2007's The Wolf. And for a few years, we didn't really hear from Shooter Jennings for a while, and then in 2010, he drops Black Ribbons. And it's single-handedly one of the biggest what the fuck moves that he's ever made. If you've been following Shooter for the last few years, you know that he does kind of an outlaw country southern rock, Lynyrd Skynyrd kind of music. Writes songs about drinking, women, fast cars, the typical country kind of stuff. That's not, but I mean, it's not typical country. It's not the shit that's on the radio at all. But more of the classic country that you would hear probably from the 60s and 70s. But all that changed in 2010 with this release. Now, what I really appreciate about Shooter and about Waylon and the whole Jennings clan is that they're not afraid to do something different and push boundaries of what country music can be. And let's be first and foremost, this is definitely not a country album. This is not a country album. Those of you expecting another Put the O Back in Country, or 4th of July, or to a lesser extent Walk a Life, or any of those songs that you might like on the earlier albums, will be completely disappointed with this release. This is more akin to an electronic rock album. In a way, it's almost like the Allman Brothers Band and the Steve Miller Band playing with Nine Inch Nails and Rage Against the Machine. It's a very 2010 sounding album. Lots of distorted guitars, lots of electronic sounds, lots of keyboards, use of auto-tune. Shooter is very aware of the kind of technology that's prevalent in 2010. The good news for Shooter's fans is this. The passion that was there on the first two albums, like Let's Put the O Back in Country and Electric Rodeo, is back. Those of fans who were a little disappointed with The Wolf will definitely be there. But for the bad news is that if you're wanting him to be the second coming of Waylon Jennings, you're going to be very, very disappointed. I mean, don't get me wrong, the albums that Shooter has made up to this point have been very great, and it follows the family tradition of, that kind of hard-driving country music, but people seem to forget that Waylon was breaking down barriers and doing something completely unexpected. And this new album is not country at all. It's about as much as country, is just as much country as, anything you might hear on the radio, probably. Which is to say, it's not country. It also, in my opinion, it also might be one of the best concept albums since 2001's Southern Rock Opera by the Drive-By Truckers. There's just so much to talk about this album because it really is a completely different evolutional step for Shooter. I could talk about each track, but I'll just focus on the overall presentation. This is, the concept is this. A radio DJ named Will-O-the-Wisp, who's played brilliantly by Stephen King, by the way. He's living in basically what is martial law in the United States. The United States of America has pretty much gone to hell in a handbasket. I mean, we already have, but this is just worse. And everything's pretty much under martial law. There are soldiers with guns everywhere making sure that we're all staying in our homes, and there's war everywhere. There is, mindless thought control and censorship. And Will-o'-the-Wisp is the last kind of free speech radio show, and then now it's being quarantined by the government for their programming. So in his last hour of defense, he plays music from the one band that he considers to be opinionated, and he plays the music of Hierophant, and he plays the music off the album. So it's a pretty neat concept. It has been done before by Roger Waters. His Radio Chaos album was pretty much the same concept, but this is a darker album than Radio Chaos. That one has a little bit of The Tide is Turning. Well, there's a song called The Tide is Turning, and it's more like a positive message, like we can do this. But this album is dark, it's murky, it really has not a whole lot of hope. There's a glimmer of hope, but there's really not. So it's kind of the album to the second coming of the apocalypse in a way. The world is going to hell, we can't do anything to stop it, we're fucked. That's basically the message of this album. Now, whether or not you can take 70 minutes of that message is up to you. I personally think it's a message to be told. Now, the music on this album is is all over the map. I can't really pinpoint one exact kind of sound on this album. I mean, there are some songs that are electronic, there are some songs that are kind of soulful, and there are some songs that are kind of more country. I mean, there's still some songs that have the country sound, but there's also some R&B in it, there's some modern pop into it, there's some punk into it, there's some hard rock, there's some electronic. It's all over the map. I mean, take a song like Wake Up, which just begins with Shooter and piano, and then before you know it, we're doing some sort of like stream of electronic sounds, and there's this bass line that's right out of like Pink Floyd's The Wall, and then and before you know it, there's a guitar solo that sounds like it came straight out of Tom Morello, and it builds to this climatic kind of Black Sabbath riff. I mean, this is not the same guy. This does not sound like the same guy who said, "Let's put the O back in country." All right, this is a new sound. Some great songs on here. I really enjoy Triskaidekaphobia, which is the Fear of 13. It kind of has this, I don't know. It's a very progressive rock song. It almost reminds me of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, to be perfectly honest. And then there's the Breaking Point, which is kind of Allman Brothers meets Nine Inch Nails, which is what he said in interviews, what it sounds like. And everything else is Illusion, sounds like a really hard rockin' version of the White Album. There's only a few tracks that kind of harken back to that country sound. God Bless Alabama, which I didn't quite understand its point on the album. It's a good song, but I really didn't understand why it was in this album. It would have been great on Electric Rodeo, but I don't really think it fits on this album. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about the gripes on this album. There are a few songs on here that I really didn't understand why it was in the context of like an Armageddon kind of album. One of them is "Fuck You, I'm Famous." Now, this is a good song on its own. It's a real good song. But does it really need to be on like this kind of science fiction, futuristic coming, martial law kind of album? I really don't think it really should have fit on there. It sounds like a good song if it was left on something like The Wolf or Electric Rodeo. And Lights in the Sky is just strange. It's not unlistenable by any means. It's just a very, very odd song. I couldn't really tell what was going on in that song, to be perfectly honest. So in some of the more electronic stuff on there, I understand the point of it, but it's just a little too unlistenable for me. Summer of Rage is one of those songs. It's one of the songs where the video really helps it, but it does kind of have that weird 80s feel to it. I'm really not, and I'm also really not too comfortable with Shooter Jennings using auto-tune on a few songs. The Illuminated is a good example of this. It just feels like he's kind of caving into the trends of 2010 and new music, when this album is supposed to be anything but a trendy album. So those are my only gripes. But aside from that, this is a really fantastic record. Great, powerful message. Great songs too. A lot of my favorite Shooter Jennings songs are on here.